Hi, welcome everybody. Welcome to our webinar this month. Here we're taking a look at the 2023 JAR Research Priorities list. And we're joined today by Leslie Wood and Graeme Hutton. And we're super excited to have both of them. Leslie Wood is a world-class data science leader. She's most recently the Chief Research Officer at NC Solutions. With a PhD in machine learning, Leslie is an expert in how advertising builds brands, the integration of complex data, and measuring incremental sales, as well as other research specialties. Among the many accolades celebrating her work, Leslie is the author of multiple JAR articles, recipient of the ARF's Irwin Efron Demystification Award, I love that name, an inductee of the Market Research Council Hall of Fame, JAR Best Paper winner, and is a member of our JAR Senior Advisory Board. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, Leslie.
My pleasure.
Graeme Hutton is Senior Vice President Group Partner for Research at Universal McCann, with more than 20 years of experience in all forms of media and communications research. Graeme's principal clients include Johnson & Johnson and Energizer Holdings. His research expertise spans media and advertising effectiveness for digital and social television, strategic communications for US and global media, and multivariate modeling for word of mouth and earned media. Graeme is a member of the JAR Editorial Review Board and is also a JAR author. Thank you so much for joining us as well, Graeme.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Awesome. I want to do a couple shameless plugs for JAR before we dive in as well. One is we have a really exciting data release and call for ideas with T-Vision. This is closing in just a few days at the end of the month. So please, if you haven't checked this out, you're interested at all in attention, take a look at this. This is located on our website, journalofadvertisingresearch.com. Likewise, we have a call for papers on pro-social advertising messages edited by the wonderful Marla Ron Stafford. This is also closing, I think, in about a month or two. So please check that out if you have anything that might be related to this particular topic. We also have a call for papers on the future of advertising using VR, AR, and the Metaverse, edited by Kirsten, Anna, and Kirk. So again, if you're interested, check that out on our website, journalofadvertisingresearch.com. And super exciting, just went up live on the Ikoria website, is we're doing a writer's workshop on how to craft industry relevant research. This is in association with the Ikoria conference, which is located in Bordeaux this year, and it's happening the end of June. Registrations just went live for Ikoria, and you can also apply using this link right here with the QR code to be part of this workshop. The workshop is free and it's happening the afternoon right before the Ikoria conference begins. So again, you can check out all of these things on our website, or of course by following us on our newsletter as well. Cool, so now we're jumping into taking a look at our research priorities list. And what we're really excited to do is today bring to life this list and discuss some of these different topics that came through in this editorial. Just to kind of give a bit of background on the list, the whole goal of this is to really help us as academics better understand where there might be overlap with industry interests. I know it can be really challenging to go through and know what industry is excited about and what some of the questions and areas are that are really quite hot for them. Obviously, there's ways to do it, through reading different, media sources like Ad Age or Work or things like that as well too. But the whole goal here is really to distill what these hot areas are. And so just as a bit of background on the process, in the fall, I went through and did a bunch of interviews with folks in industry, including some people who are on this call here today. Thank you. And we went through and talked about where are the different areas that are exciting and interesting for industry, and that could also overlap with academic research. So we're encouraging you, if you've got questions as we go through today, throw those in the chat. We're more than happy to try and address those as well. And again, with JAR, we're looking for articles that definitely build theory and further theory and have contributions that are, general in nature, but we really do care as well about having relevance to industry. And we hope that this list and these ideas are going to help, perhaps give you ideas and perhaps direct research towards some of these areas that we're most excited about. So let's just jump in and we'll start talking around the first one. I'll go in the order. Basically, we've got the list in just to make it a bit easier to follow in case you wanted to jump around later when looking at the recording, but we'll start off with attention. So attention seems to be a super hot topic right now, and I'm curious to open it up to Leslie and Graeme. What are some of the different areas that you think could be, or questions you think that could be interesting to examine from an academic perspective?
Yeah, I think yeah, obviously, as you mentioned, it's really the attention du jour, issue du jour about what's going on, and it's got everybody's minds thinking about it. Ironically, I'll start with what it's not, because there's often confusion about attention with other factors, and what attention isn't is non-engagement. I think the best definition I ever heard of engagement was attention plus emotion equals engagement. And that came from Dr. Carl Marcy when he was chief neuroscientist at Nielsen. And I think it sums up beautifully the difference between attention and engagement. It doesn't mean to say that papers shouldn't look at this relationship. I think it would be very interesting if they could, to get at that and understand what's really going on. I personally think, although I've seen no proof of it, that attention is probably related in some way to a flight or fight response, because when I remember when I first moved to San Diego, I saw a tarantula for the first time walking in front of me, and it really grabbed my attention. But then the emotions that flowed afterwards were really got me involved. And I think there's something there. What we do know in media terms, though, is that, for instance, with TV shows, is that the more you watch of a show, the more likely you are to watch the ads. And that is a classic, easy relationship to understand. And the more that we can get towards that understanding for other media channels, I think it will be a great help in developing that whole area. And I think there are two areas that are going on at the moment. One is looking at very specific elements of what attention is, and the other is what norms exist, such as that heuristic I just mentioned. And I think the more that we can go along both those lines would be great.
So I was going to speak to something very similar, to harken back to engagement. In the 2008, 07, in that area, a lot of focus was on engagement. And the difficulty was engagement how? Was it with the brand? Was it with the media? Was it with the ad? Was it with, like, what were you engaged with? And defining that, and it, while it was very hot and exciting, there was very little that was produced that was concrete, actionable, something you could actually use to create better media plans or understand. We certainly know that context drives engagement, and context drives attention, as Graeme said. If you're watching a TV show that you watch all the time, you're more likely to see commercials. I think attention also, if there's a car crash in the movie and then the ad is for insurance, right? You're more likely to be grabbed by that. You're more likely to be, your attention will be pulled to that. So context, engagement, attention are all pieces, but attention is the key right now that people are thinking about. And I think that's because people have gone to shorter and shorter attention span and more sound bites. And, if something doesn't catch your eye in seconds, milliseconds, you're on to the next. So understanding, and I think it's particularly, in general, the interest is attention, but specifically it's about advertising and what causes attention to be drawn to advertising for a particular product.
Okay, so like what's driving attention, different factors that moderate that or change that in some way, shape, or form, right? Measurement came up a little bit as well too. That seemed to be an issue in the discussions I had, and I'm curious if either of you have any thoughts on that as well, of different ways of potentially measuring attention, if you think there's still space to explore that or still questions around that.
There's not only room to explore it, I think it's ripe for research, and developing norms is actually essential. So whenever you come up with a set of metrics, having norms for those metrics is going to be what what's a 7 or a 42 or an 89, or, you know, like what's some number is meaningless unless it's put into a context of norms, right? How well do you do compared to other brands? How well does one form of advertising do in comparison to another form of advertising? You know, whether it's TV to digital to, you know, short form, long form, etc.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I'm
completely.
I'm
The only
curious as
thing
well to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I guess so. The only thing I'd add on this topic really is to show how massively it's grown in the last couple of years. The ARF, that's the Advertising Research Foundation, is doing an attention audit, and I was talking to them last week, and apparently there are 55 companies tracking attention across the world, which I think is pretty amazing.
Wow.
But it shows you how this has really come to the fore recently. So it's a very hot topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. Yeah, I think that it's interesting as well too, given the definition you had, Graeme, at the beginning. Because I think we often, at least from an academic perspective, think about attention through like an eye tracking sense, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't capture the emotion or the engagement that you might have with a particular piece of advertising or media as well. Well, let's jump into AI machine learning then. So next big one, of course, AI machine learning. We've seen a tremendous amount happening with that, especially as ChatGPTs come out the last couple of months. We've seen people playing with that and using that as well. So I'm curious, what are some of your thoughts on different areas of, you know, questions or topics that could be interesting to examine related to AI machine learning and advertising?
So I did a lot of work over the last 10 years incorporating machine learning into measuring sales effects, and using machine learning to help clean data, and using machine learning to help do targeting and model behavior. We built something called the super learner, which is creates an ensemble model, and much of that was built on academic research that we and we hired some of the academics who wrote that research, you know, from other fields, particularly biology, you know, illness. But I think there's huge potential. So there's in how you do research, who you decide to survey or interview, all the way, you know, how you do enumerate, all this sort of mechanics of actually measuring things, to cleaning the data as it arrives, finding outliers, finding, you know, understanding. So there's outliers and then there's false data. So you'll have outliers might if we look at purchasing patterns, outliers tend to be the people who buy at an enormous amount, but they could be very accurate, right? It's not that they're in the big data world, they're not inaccurate. We're looking for ways to use machine learning to find data that is not accurate, where the behavior, there's something about it that's a bot, or it's in the real world of supermarkets, it's the cashier's frequent shopper card, right? That gets scanned. I mean, those are very easy to find, but there's others that are harder to find, right? And work there would be phenomenal, but that's all in the media research arena. There's all now with ChatGPT and all the steps that are moving forward there. It's all the wonderful ways that we can imagine that this is going to help creative do a better job telling the story that finds the connections. I mean, an ad is supposed to connect the consumer to the brand. It's supposed to bring some connection where the brand is meaningful to that consumer and that consumer finds connection. Building ads that do that is really hard, you know. Maybe there's wonderful ways that AI can help there. Like, this is the brand, whether it's focus groups or what, how do you take that information and turn it into the key unique selling proposition for the brand, or the meaningful purpose for the brand, and how do you convey that in a way that connects that consumer to the brand is essential. And I think we're going to see enormous work there.
Yeah, I agree. There, as far as I know, from an agency perspective, because that's where I work, there are two agencies, creative agencies, that use AI, actively use it and promote their use of it in what they do already. One's based in San Francisco. It's called Supernatural. I used to work with its chief strategy officer, Mike Barra, and they're applying AI techniques to help develop creative and build it through. And the other organization I'm aware of is VidMob, which is used by one of our clients, and they use AI-powered technology to deliver against campaign guidelines and do global campaigns. Because one of the reasons why AI can be important and is used is because there are so many iterations of a campaign message. So, for example, you have one message in one country or one region. How does it transform into others? And AI can arguably speed that up as you transfer from cultures or from languages and so forth. The other thing is that, quite simply, it can help develop ideas and develop norms that come from that. So, for example, what's important in an area I work in is programmatic advertising, which is computer-generated targeting advertising to very, very specific audiences. And it's important to get that. It's close to personalization, which obviously is a separate topic, but it gets at how AI can apply in those areas.
Yeah, I'm super excited by all of the stuff that we're seeing with this. I think the creative is super cool. I'd never thought about going through using it for market research, as you mentioned as well too, Leslie. For cleaning data, things like that. That's super interesting. And of course, targeting. It's all super interesting stuff that's happening here. Cool. I think there's definitely a lot of potential questions to explore here.
When we talk about lookalike models, for instance, understanding what it means to be lookalike, and what things do you need to look like, machine learning is extremely valuable there. It's extremely valuable at identifying, does it matter whether you're the same age to be a lookalike, or is it really about something much more nuanced? And I think those are powerful things that are and have been and will continue to change dramatically the quality of what we're able to target. Yeah.
It's super exciting for methodologists as well too, because basically there's a whole new field to be able to play with for updating some of the different ways we do stuff, which is quite cool.
Yeah.
Next one, this is kind of a controversial one at the moment as well too, AR, VR, and the metaverse. So I want to kind of open, do you think there's still a future of the metaverse? That's the big one I want to throw out there, start off with.
Yeah, I genuinely do. And, I think that, the metaverse is used by a huge swathe, certainly in the US, of the population that's often overlooked in marketing. And that's Gen Alpha or the under 12s. There's a very large take up by children of the metaverse in the gaming that they do it in. There was some research done by a UK company, ironically, in the US. They're called Park Advertising. I think they did a sample of 2,000 children under the age of 12. And legally, because of COPA laws here, you have to go interview people through the parent, or the kids through the parents. But they found very high take-up of the metaverse and NFTs in the forms of gaming tokens and things like that. So it's already got there. I think what's been misunderstood is that everybody expected it to be an adult audience. And of course, for under 12 to grow up, there's still going to be 6 to 10 years away before that becomes a major impact. But it does show that there's already a big take-up right there. There was another company called Savanta that did a classic study amongst adults and found that it was essentially, Gen Z, which is the youngest element. Of course, they're the closest element to Gen Alpha, which are kids. But there is a big take-up in this area. There also seemed to be some evidence that it was impacting parents. So I think there's a lot more to go in this area. But I think it's got legs. But I think the time scale may be longer than, say, Meta or Facebook, as it was called, originally envisaged.
Yeah, it's not an area that I've spent a lot of time focused on. And my intuition has been, it's been slow to grow. But these it's fascinating. So it will grow, but will it grow at a speed that keeps, large companies like Meta investing in it,
Mm-hmm.
What about lighter forms like AR? Thinking about AR, VR, perhaps not being as like extreme as Metaverse. I think there's room or more potential there, potentially to start off, or?
Well, it depends what you call it. Like if you're thinking about filters on Snap as AR, that's one thing. Kids love that already. It's used widely. Like what degree are we talking? Like, how much is where does that really fit?
Yeah. There were questions about, how effective these different formats are and what kind of benefits they can provide potentially to consumers. So I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts on those? Or if you have other questions you think that would be useful for, more research to happen on this topic?
See, I feel like this one is this very slow growing.
Mm-hmm.
It may be interesting, but I wouldn't say that it's hot. Like if a researcher is totally connected to this and in love with it, great. Like if your passions lead you here, wonderful. But I wouldn't, if I were just looking at the list, that wouldn't be where I would choose to put my energy, right?
Well, we won't tell people who are interested in the special call, but the good news, though, we have a special call for papers on AR, VR, and the Metaverse. But no, I agree. I think it's probably a tougher thing to research just because of the nature of the experiences that are involved. But I do think, as you both point out, that it is going to grow. So if you can get in early, especially if you're looking for citations, right, and get stuff out on this and be one of the earlier researchers, that's quite cool. Yeah. But I do think it might take a bit longer than people expect it to. Yeah.
I mean, given that I mentioned gaming, one of the big booming areas, and gaming is growing globally across the world at a very fast pace. And I think that's what's going to drive this whole area. So, it's the linkage between AR and VR and gaming. Also, what we're seeing there is the growth in streaming. But streaming is a foretaste. If you want to try a game out, you can try it out in a streaming environment and see if you really like it, and then maybe buy it for a console because the speeds of consoles are much faster. And of course, that brings down your streaming brings down the cost of the equipment. So I think one of the barriers that is there that might be worth looking at is price barriers and acceptance of that. But I think it's really down to demographics. And we'll definitely see AR, VR, Metaverse take off. But it's principally amongst adolescents and children at the moment.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, as they grow, we'll see that expanded. We actually have a question that just came in around doing research in this area with Gen Alpha, as you mentioned, Graeme. And if there's any sort of guidelines around doing research on this. I personally don't have any. Maybe you have some suggestions on that, or?
Yeah, I mean, the laws will vary country by country, and the only laws I'm aware of that I work with in practical terms is the US. Is what they're called the COPPA laws, COPPA laws, and those laws, basically stop you directly approaching under 12s. However, how it is done is through the parents, and as long as the parent agrees to, if you like, interview the children, or you could even do it, in person interviews, for example, and do it in home with the parent present, then that's absolutely fine. And that's how Park did it. The company I mentioned. They're a UK-based company, but they got a decent sample, 2,000. So they were looking at some robust numbers.
Wow. Okay.
And it is feasible to do it. We do use online companies to get at, the under 13s. And so it is feasible to do it, and look at it in some detail. But the rules and regulations are probably very different in Europe and other markets. So it might be much more liberal in some markets, which might make this market easier to get at.
Yeah. And the other one as well too is if you're doing it through an academic institution, like there's going to be quite strict rules for the ethics boards for schools, and they'll have guidelines on how to do this as well too. We definitely encourage you to, we require that you follow those as well too. Awesome. Onward to nice little segue into privacy. So we've seen a lot of discussion about privacy the last couple of years, especially in the US. It's kind of done like a 180 there, and the death of cookies as well too. So I'm really curious of what are some of the questions you think are burning that you'd like to see investigated related to privacy.
You want me to take this, Leslie?
Sure, start.
Yeah. I have a different take on, because I've been talking to the ARF again about this, and I've got a slightly different take I'm not a privacy expert, but I talk to our privacy experts, and they have a different take on which surprised me, because I showed them all the usual things about people's attitudes to privacy and all that, which I think are not well known, but relatively easy to anticipate. What they came up with, which was, is how willing are consumers to trade information, and what are they going to get for it? And let's take that a little step further. Are they going to provide fake information or less valuable information? Which starts to get us into an interesting area if marketers want to get at that. So for a very simple example of that personally would be, I have 3 emails. I have one for friends, I have one for more general stuff, and then I have another one that I only use for people who I don't want to, or companies I don't want to be bothered with. And I think that's something that this whole area needs to look at. What is the consumer, what's the consumer relationship? What is the transactional relationship that consumers are prepared to put forward on that? And flipping that, on privacy a bit further is trust. How much do consumers trust marketers in this area? And it probably needs to go beyond a classic survey to get at this. But what do consumers actually say or feel or do and believe in this area? And I think that exploring the whole area of consumer trust and honesty in the relationship probably varies a lot by country, but also probably varies by age and so forth.
I think it varies by platform too.
Yeah.
Like your experience of having your privacy violated has large implications, right? I mean, I find it very disconcerting that I'll go and buy something online and my husband starts getting ads for it. We don't have the same name. Yeah, we live in the same household, but it's not similar platforms, or I don't have the same apps that he does, and they, it's kind of so but I think that's really an age thing, right? My kids couldn't care less about, they just, one is in security, so nothing is put online, and the other is completely oblivious to the importance of it at all, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. It makes me think of the brouhaha that's happening with TikTok in the US at the moment. If you listen to a classic news station, they'll play it straight, but if you listen to younger audience, they just see tech illiterate, bureaucrats, legal, in Washington trying to interfere in something they've never used and don't really understand, So I think there's some age on this, definitely.
I think there's also the publishers have used privacy as a way to make it harder for their competitors. So some of it is not really about privacy. It's about, hoarding your own data and not sharing, and walled gardens and all those kinds of things. It's under the guise of privacy, but I'm not sure that it's actually about privacy. I think it's more about an excuse for making it difficult. That said, cookies probably will eventually go away. There will be fewer ways to actually track people. So inventions and methods and I mean, what can you track? Are there things you could start to track? Are there ways to track? And then methods of using data that instead of are at a household or a person or a device level are at minor aggregates. Like there's room for methodology in looking at how do I look at, I have a patent for something called, I don't know, it's just one of a whole bunch of patents, but the idea is that you cluster small groups and pass information about small groups. And being the ability to pass that information creates the ability to share things that at a level where privacy is no longer critical, but you still get the same level of insights, right? Like ways to do that. There's a lot of room for that in the world.
Yeah, so being able to like basically aggregate people in a small little cluster so they don't feel as exposed, but you can still get useful data out of that group.
That's right. I think there's a lot of room for thinking through how lots of our methodologies could be applied with small groups of people and clusters instead of, and how do you do that? And the rigor, like what understanding the pitfalls and how to do it well would be valuable to the industry.
I think it's interesting as well too, because I see that a lot with students, and like some students are like sort of like, it sounds like your kids as well, diametrically opposed. Some like do not care at all, and some are very concerned and don't have social media, things like that are very restrictive, right? But it even varies within the same people, right? We'll see students who, you know, like will agree to everything when it comes to those website pop-ups and things like that for GDPR, but will still not have social or things like that. So it's very context specific, as you pointed out, on the different platforms. And I think like understanding how people navigate that is kind of interesting. I also think from like a user, like I was just thinking about it the other day, like, you know, iPhones nowadays are terrible because there's always the pop-ups asking you for permission to do stuff. And I wish there was almost a global button to be like, I don't care. Just bring it back to the iPhone 5 years ago when everything just kind of worked, which would be nice. So I think it's interesting, you know, to what extent people care and how much they can intrude, you know, being privacy aware can intrude in the experience, which is also kind of interesting to me.
I think though, once you agree, they don't ask you again.
Oh, I seem to be getting stalked by them. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. Just looking at it. So.
I think you get stalked when you don't agree. They keep wanting you to agree.
I have been agreeing, but maybe it's just me.
Yeah.
But we've got a question as well too. We had one. I'm going back to TikTok. This is from a participant. What's your take on pursuing research and advertising on the personalization privacy paradox? So I know there's been some work on that, but I'm curious if you think there's still room to explore that further.
Yeah, I think there definitely is. You know, I mean, mentioning TikTok, it reminded me that I think about 2 weeks ago, The Economist magazine wrote an article about how TikTok was impacting the growth of massively lifting it. The growth of romantic fiction, which is about the last thing I would have expected TikTok to do. But you know, it just shows you the power of that platform, and it moves in various different ways. And I think that, you know, personalization and privacy has some way to go because nobody's really cracked the, you know, what's the alternative to a cookie. You know, there's various, you know, Facebook went down it one route, and then, sorry, Google went down it one route with flocks, as they were called, and then backed off that. And I think that, you know, there isn't really an understanding of where we might go on that. So I think there is enough to understand or to get out of that personalization element. More importantly, it's overlaps with you know, the two privacy and topics, privacy and personalization definitely overlap. The question here with personalization is how much does it increase effectiveness from an advertiser's point of view? The answer is it does quite substantially, but I'd like to see that, you know, trade-off understood. and quantified to a greater extent. We've known that personalization, for instance, makes a big difference ever since direct mail started. And, it's known that if you personalize the letter, good old-fashioned letter, then it would get a much higher take up than it would if you just said hello sir or madam. So from that perspective, it's known to be very powerful.
Yeah,
I think so there's different kinds of personalization in advertising. And about 5 years ago, I was at a conference, maybe it was the ANA or the 4As, and they were showing advertiser after advertiser talked about how they have 4,000 ads as variations on a core. And I just had to question, do women really respond if it's more pink and guys if it's more blue? Like a lot of the ways things were personalized felt artificial and wouldn't actually feel like they were personalized. So I think understanding there's pink and blue isn't going to make a big difference. But if you get too close to home, too close to who I am, it then feels creepy, right? Like where are the lines? What are the things that matter? You don't want to be too creepy, On the other hand, what are the things that actually improve the quality of the connection between the consumer and the product? Like what are the personalizations that truly make a difference? And I think it's probably really understanding what drives the consumer's interests, or but can you get enough information and can you personalize it well enough to make that trade-off?
I think it also matters on screen size as well. So TV has a different level of personalization to, say, a mobile phone, but also immersion. I mean, obviously, if you took a channel like cinema, that's much more difficult to personalize. But so I think screen size has something to do with it, particularly in today's environment. And the more that we could look at that sort of playoff, I think that will be a very useful area to look at. I've actually been asked in the last 2 weeks, for POVs on this topic. So it's obviously a hot area. Yeah.
It makes me, your comment there, Leslie, made me think about both Target and that Target, scandal they had around the personalization, and the pregnancy. It's a classic case, years ago. And then also just about these new, AI tools that we have, right? And I think about that, we're getting toward an era where I could see an ad for clothing and social media with myself as the model. And,
Yes.
At what point is that creepy? At what point is that cool? Or when is that cool? And it's kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Cool. In the interest of time, I'm going to jump next to DEI. So tons of interest in diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also lots of questions around this, both in terms of, depicting it, how to depict it authentically, measuring the effects of it. So I'm really curious if you have any perspectives or questions you wanted to share around this.
So I've done a lot of research on how advertising has effects against different segments of the population. And it's very clear that the less assimilated or the less dominant you are in the culture, the more you respond to advertising. And so that's sort of held a lot of advertisers back from worrying about diversity, because Black and Hispanic, et cetera, groups responded more, right? But I think that the culture's made a big turn in the last several years, and it's really valuable to see lots of different ways of doing inclusion, lots of different ways of allowing people to be different parts of the same parts of the community. The key is being authentic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, cringeworthy. You don't want to be, doing something that's truly off base. On the other hand, authentically speaking to multiple cultures in a non-confrontational way is probably is extremely valuable, and understanding how to do that would be very helpful. Researching.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that JR did a great work, a great paper last September with the paper that was called "How Advertisements Mixing Black and White Actors Can Affect Consumer Intent." We found that very interesting. As an agency, we found that a very interesting paper. I actually circulated a summary of it around some key execs. So it definitely has an important area, and it also overlaps into pro-social areas, which we're going to talk about, because some clients, brands are definitely more associated with that area of being more diversity and equitable and more inclusive than others, and you'd be surprised at the range of that. And you can measure that indirectly through things like word of mouth tracking and things like that. So I do agree with that. I also agree with Leslie on the general levels of the way it's presented. For instance, as a pre-testing creative agency, an agency that specializes in pre-testing creative called System One, both in the US and the UK, although I think they're headquartered in the UK. And they did a paper called Feeling Seen in the US, how diversity and advertising unites us. And it talks about how it really does have an additional effect. And I think it's a very worthwhile paper. You can just download online to trigger some ideas. One of the areas that I found intriguing was when it didn't work, and there was one ad that featured a girl where her name was being mispronounced, which didn't work. And I think, because whilst it's important to that person, that individual, how their name's mispronounced. My name is Graeme, and it gets continually mispronounced in the US as Graeme. But I just ride over it. I think that might have been the reaction. Of course, if you're in a specific part of the population that feels underrepresented, that might get magnified far greater than I could ever see as a white privileged male. But I think that what are the triggers is still something that we need to.
Awesome. I just posted in there that article you referenced, Graeme, and I think it's a very hot area. I think that some comments that came up as well too in the interviews I had was around bringing it forward or backwards, I guess, from not just the advertisements we see, but also looking at the marketing research and planning that goes on behind the scenes as well too, and really sort of integrating it from that perspective too, which could be kind of interesting.
Yeah, we definitely. I was just at NCS, which is part of Nielsen, and DEI is enormous there. Actually, my team for years was the most diverse, because to me, if you're going to be doing innovation, having different voices is essential. So diverse in terms of gender, and race and perspective, but also a perspective on different kinds of ways of thinking. What had been what were their degrees in, so that you have people who are actually thinking differently. Not only with it, so diversity can mean to me quite a bit of things, and it's really valuable to our industry to have that level of diversity. It dramatically improves, particularly when you get to machine learning, where there's so many hidden. It can be so fraught with stereotypes that you have to. It's good to have a lot of diversity in the people who are looking at it from many different perspectives. Definitely
helps with creativity, right? There's lots of research showing that too. So I think your intuition's right there. Let's jump to sustainability and pro-social advertising. I'm guessing you both have thoughts on these, but I know Graeme had sent them through before as well too.
Yeah.
So
Graeme,
different questions and ideas you might have.
Yeah. Well, I sometimes see cynicism about this. Oh, clients are only doing this because they feel they have to or they ought to. But I have to genuinely say, I know there are definitely corporately and individually clients that feel very passionately about, this whole area. And they really do care about it because ultimately, they've all got children. They all want the planet to exist and, wants to go on in some forms or another. And so there is a genuine feeling that, that's important. I think that we've been able to, I mentioned a word of mouth tracker. Actually, it's called Engagement Labs, and it is possible to indirectly track brands to levels of pro-social or diversity and other areas such as that. So you can see, if I want to see who's talking about brand X, what else are those consumers talking about? And if I was competitor brand Y, is that the same way? So that's a very, is it so? And the answer is no. You will get big differences even in the same category between brands. And so I think there's a big opportunity to look at that just by indirect measures as well as direct measures to see what's going on and why. I think there's also some bad ways of doing it. I mean, WARC, the World Advertising Research Center, did a short article in the last week, which cited this research, and it said over half of those surveyed could not name a single company that was making a difference into the three key areas of environment, climate change, or diversity and inclusion. And I think that misses the point. And you don't just go, because people don't carry around in their minds, don't carry around in their heads an idea of associating this brand with pro-social or otherwise. I think it's more implicit. But to try to explore that implicit relationship would be really, really valuable. Because when I read that research that I just taught, I turned around to the managers that are in charge of this area. And I said, I don't think this should be practiced for a second because it's the wrong sort of research. But you just need to know that doing it directly won't necessarily give you the right answer. But I think indirect methods or qualitative methods that at least start to dig into that might lead into quantitative research. I think they were more likely to yield positive results. So it's an interesting area, and it needs to be tackled with some level of sensitivity and not in a straight, hey, name me a company that's pro-social or into sustainability, because it doesn't quite work like that.
I'm going to cede this to Graeme. I think he's done an excellent job, and I agree with everything he said.
Thank you, Leslie.
Yeah,
coming from you, that's
awesome.
praising.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Like it's so challenging to is it just table stakes? Is it something that how do you do it in a way that doesn't seem like it's fake or greenwashing as well? I think these are really important questions. And what does it actually do, right? So thank you. Yeah. Next one is retail media network. So I have to admit, I'd heard about these tangentially, but I didn't know how big they were until kind of looking into them more in the fall when they came up in the interview. So I'm really curious as to what you think, both of you think are the cool sort of questions or what's happening here.
So did a lot of work with these. So the key is that if you advertise on a retail media network, that retail media network provides data to the advertiser. They don't all provide exactly the same kind of data, but they do provide information. And working with different retail media networks to figure out what could be done with that information, what could be done with the data that's provided would be incredibly valuable. You have purchases, it's if I'm going to be, store Y is a retail media network, has a retail media network. They can give you the purchases at store Y of your brand, right? But are they going to give it to you at a household level, a device level, a person level? Probably not, but in aggregate. And how can you use those along with the rest of the information you have? And there are places where it's hard to get data about what's sold. They're not in, traditional sources. So a really fruitful area to imagine, okay, now I'm an advertiser. What do I do with all this data? How do I use it to make decisions? How do I use it to inform my media buys and my targeting, particularly? And understand whether my advertising is working and whether certain kinds of ads are working better than other kinds of ads, and et cetera. I don't know, Graeme. Do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you say. I take a slightly different view because retail media networks are taking off at an amazing growth rate. It's one of the hot areas at the moment. McKinsey did a short paper about it some months ago, which I found quite intriguing. But I think the reason why it's important is twofold. One is the biggest driver of sales, being in the advertising business, the biggest driver of sales isn't advertising. The biggest driver of sales is distribution. And that's almost universally true. If you get distribution, then you'll get sales, and advertising is a much higher. And there's been various studies done by that prove that. Any econometric study that looks at that will show that. So there's one level, the retail media network, if you like, if you're an advertiser or a marketer that wants to get in with a retailer, say I'm going to take a US example because that comes most closely to mind. And if you want to get into Target, which is one of the biggest multiple retailers in the US, then you could use their retail marketing network, which is called Roundtable, and you would get into that, and you would hopefully boost sales that way using that level of distribution, because you'd be targeting customers that they know with that level of distribution. So I think that works in the first area. The second thing is that what is growing is the use of first-party data. And retail media networks, which is more aligned to what you were saying, Leslie, are definitely have that first-party data. While they may not give you access to it, it's a close proxy, if you like. At least I would argue that. So I think there's a lot to show in this area, and I think it would be useful to prove out the power of how is the relationship between the retailer, the retail market, their retail marketing network, media network, I should say, and the advertiser. How are they doing that? It would probably have to be some sort of quantitative study, maybe an econometric study that looked at that to see what actually happens when a brand was able to access that and drive it through. But they've seen very fast growth in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to move into what I'm going to call the lightning round. I'm conscious of time, and I know people have other commitments. So we have 3 more left, which is streaming, pulling together what's already known on different topics, and then also rechecking different classic axioms and models that we have. So I'm curious, any different thoughts you might have on any of those 3 topics in the remaining 5 minutes or so that we've got left?
I think the last two are very connected. They're not truly separate. So maybe I'll put them together. I love meta-analyses. They're kind of like the value of norms, et cetera, creating, case studies are really nice, but it's much better if you've got lots of data that you're looking at. It's the one-off case. Okay, that happened there, but why is interesting, but it's much more informative to have something with you where you have lots and lots of data. And I think refining our models that we use to think about how advertising works and how brands grow and how brands, how to build brands is essential. I think we've lost the idea that loyalty matters. But we're finding more and more that loyalty matters an enormous amount in terms of how people respond to advertising. So all those kinds of pieces, how they go together is essential. And I think there's room for a lot more information happening right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do very much agree with that. I think arguably the best synthesizer of data is being done by the IPA, that's the Institute of Practitioners in Advertising in the UK, particularly by Les Binnett and Peter Fields. I think they've done a lot of work in this area, and you know, I quote them a lot. The other interesting, you know, when you look at this, is the work done by Professor Dominic Hansen's of UCLA, Anderson, the business school there. He wrote something called Empirical Generalizations about Marketing's Impact. It's only available on Kindle these days. I don't think there's any, you can even get a hard copy. But, you know, he did that for the MSI, the Marketing Science Institute. And I think that's a really, that's a very useful reference. But, you know, those are, his is an overarching one, but I think it shows that the power of synthesizing what's known and rechecking what's assumed as well as what's known might be good. You know, the classic one that I think is often assumed is, you know, is the Byron Sharp, you know, ideas, are those still relevant? I think they are, but maybe they need to be modified in some way. You know, what's going on there? I think that's a key area. You know, and also I think the area where Leslie's been very influential, you know, the work Leslie did on recent brand buyers, and you know, allied to that, you've got IRI's you work on competitive brand buyers, you know, revisiting that alongside work that the MMA and Joel Rubinson did on what he called the movable middle. I think there's a whole area there that's very rich for synthesizing, rechecking, and looking at to see what works and why. Shall I just touch on streaming while we go on to that?
Definitely, go for it.
Yeah. So streaming, I feel in the US in particular, has grown very rapidly. You know, it was only 3 or 4 years ago about CTV, that's connected television. It was only about 20% of viewing. Now it's around a third, maybe higher. And YouTube is dominating that in the US. But you know, I'm going to take a cynic's point of view on this, because I'd love to know what consumers really think of streaming and whether they're really going for it. Because I think there's a whole area of, well, why is it growing? We tend to think, oh, it's a consumer revolution because viewing is a consumer product. But in fact, if you look at the major US TV networks, they're often getting their shows, their new shows or their new series, and they're putting them on streaming first as a premium before they put them on their network TV equivalents. And I'm suspecting that the consumer might have some reaction or resistance to this. And I think that whilst I'm a big fan of streaming, you know, and I still think that there's way too much advertising on television. And it may seem strange for a person in advertising to say there's way too much advertising on television when I'm talking from a US perspective. It's because, you know, when I came from the UK to the US, I was dumbfounded by the amount of advertising. At the time, UK advertising was limited to 6, 7, 8 minutes an hour, whereas in the US it was 16, 17, 18 minutes an hour. And I thought, well, less is more. But when I looked at the research at the time, and I'm going back now, you know, 15 years and more, there was evidence that the advertising in the US was more just as effective as it was in, say, the UK and other markets. But I've never seen that really looked at again. And I'd like to know whether, you know, not only what are consumers' reactions to streaming, you know, do they feel they're being taken for a ride in terms of their price hikes and things like that? They're hidden in this. But also, you know, to what extent are lower ad loads, as they're called, more effective? Again, we've got some evidence of this, but I'd like to see it externally shown that, you know, that's the case. I think there's a lot of, you know, movement in this area, because basically in the US, and I'm going to use that as that parish in the US, about, you know, it's basically, you know, the broadcast networks have come down to 2 offerings that they know consumers like. One is news, but that has an older bias. And then secondly, sports, which is definitely taking off. But even there, streaming is impacting it. You know, so yeah, Netflix show about Grand Prix racing, Drive to Survive. That has had a big impact on the American F1 Formula One race in audiences here. So there's a big, what is the interaction between streaming and TV? What's the consumer reaction to pricing from providers? And how is it all impacting advertising with presumably lesser ad loads that are typically seen on streaming?
That's super interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Cool. Unfortunately, I think we're out of time. So I'm gonna, any final thoughts or burning questions you might have, or anything else either of you wanted to add on?
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
And, you know, kudos to all the researchers out there willing to take on these subjects. It's very valuable.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your perspective and bring these different, priorities to life. Hopefully people watching have had some ideas, spark and some different sort of interests come to life, which is cool. So thank you again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.